Okay, so I forgot to mention it was in Sanskrit. So if you didn't understand any of it, don't worry. It was in another language. And that little thing I just did at the end is kind of offering some prayers to our spiritual master, and the book called Bhagavad-gita, which is what we're going to be speaking from. We're going to be just speaking about one verse or one text from this book called Bhagavad-gita, which is one of the important literatures in this tradition. Technically, we're known as Brahma, Madhva, Gaudiya, Vaishnavas. And I'll break that down for you. Vaishnav means a follower of the teachings of Vishnu or Krishna. So there are a lot of different followers of the teachings of Vishnu and Krishna, and we're in a particular specific line of them. And our leaders are our personality named Lord Brahma, who happens to be one of the chief engineer of this material universe. Brahma, Madhva, another personality named Madhvacharya, who is sort of a great spiritual master, and that's in that line coming down from Lord Brahma, Madhva, Gaudiya, and then most recently a personality named Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is actually an incarnation of Krishna, who was present here on earth 500 years ago. So we're Vaishnavas, followers of the teachings of Vishnu Krishna, coming in that particular line. And that's who we were offering our respects to right after that song we sang. Okay, so we're going to do, as I said, we're going to chant one text from the Bhagavad Gita. There's over 700 of them. And we're up to chapter 2, text 57. And this is a part of the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna is instructing his friend and disciple Arjuna, who happened to be as I said, he was his friend, but he was a military general, and he was in a predicament. And his predicament was that he had to fight in a war against his friends and relatives and etc. And he was kind of reluctant to do that because, even though he could understand that there was a higher principle involved and it was really something he should do, it's very difficult to do that against your friends and relatives and people you grew up with who gave you a lot of love and attention throughout your life. You have a lot of connection with them. That's what he had to do. So he's finding it difficult. Okay. So, but as I said, it was something he should be doing, looking at how would you say it? The higher principles involved. So anyway, so Krishna's trying to help him sort of overcome the illusions that are preventing him from doing what he knows he needs to be doing. So we'll read this verse from the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And it goes, the Bhagavad Gita was spoken by Krishna, as I said, it's in Sanskrit. It's the language that most of the Vedic literatures come to us in, and all of them actually, and it's been translated by our teacher. This is his picture here on the back of the Bhagavad Gita. I think my finger's kind of tapping on it. There we go. Or maybe not. There we go. Yeah, that's him. And he's in this unbroken chain of teachers that started with Brahma, and as I mentioned, Madhvacharya, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and his, maybe another dozen or so spiritual masters after that, and he's in that chain. And about a little less than 60 years ago, he left India, came to America to introduce these teachings in the West. And he did a really good job of doing that, so much so that there are devotees of Krishna now, practically in every country. Well, I don't know about every, but a lot of countries throughout the world. And there's a lot of devotees, there's a lot of temples, there's a lot of his books are in many, many different foreign languages. So he was pretty successful in executing that mission of trying to spread Krishna consciousness worldwide. So anyway, so this is the verse for today is, as I said, text 57, and I'll chant the Sanskrit and then read the English translation. Yatsarvatra nabishnehas tatat prapya subhasubham nabirandanti nadvesti tasya pragya pratishtita. The translation is, in the material world, this is Krishna speaking, by the way. In the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. Okay, so that's what Krishna said. Now, this next thing I'm going to read is called the purport, and it's our spiritual master's commentary on what Krishna has said. So this is Srila Prabhupada's, that's his name, purport. It says, there is always some upheaval in the material world, which may be good or evil. One who is not agitated by such material upheavals, who is unaffected by good and evil, is to be understood to be fixed in Krishna consciousness. As long as one is in the material world, there is always the possibility of good and evil, because this world is full of duality. But one who is fixed in Krishna consciousness is not affected by good and evil, because he is simply concerned with Krishna, who is all good, absolute. Such consciousness in Krishna situates one in a perfect transcendental position called technically samadhi. Okay, so now I'm going to try to explain that, what you just heard, the translation, and try to explain the purport as well, so that we can really feel like we own this information. Okay, so Prabhupada says let me see if I want to say something about the translation first. In the material world, one who's unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. Okay, let's go on to the purport. There is always some upheaval in the material world. Okay, so the dictionary definition of the word upheaval is this: a violent or sudden change or disruption to something. Okay, that's the definition of upheaval. And the rest of the sentence going on to say that these upheavals, they may be good or evil. Generally, we think of an upheaval as being evil. That's usually the way the word's used, by at least American-speaking English people, I believe British too. An upheaval is generally considered, has a negative connotation. It's kind of, you generally don't hear people talk too much about good upheavals. But Prabhupada's making the point here that the upheavals in the material world could be good or evil. In other words, all of a sudden, as it says here, a sudden change, all of a sudden something very bad could happen. Well, we have a lot of experience of that. But also sometimes all of a sudden something really good could happen to you. You could come into a lot of money or whatever. You could, something unexpected, really good could happen too. So that's in the category of an upheaval. So there's both types, good and evil upheavals. So it says here, one who is not agitated by such material upheavals, by these, in other words, by the sudden change of events for the good or for the bad, who is unaffected by good and evil, is to be understood to be fixed in Krishna consciousness. Okay, so Prabhupada's making that sentence is based upon a lot of the knowledge that's already been presented in previous texts earlier in this, the book. Okay, so I'll explain some of the concepts that one needs to understand in order to be able to appreciate this sentence properly. So Prabhupada is saying, one who's not agitated by such material upheavals, who is unaffected by good and evil, is to be understood. Okay, so the idea is this, that the only way that a person's not going to be agitated by material upheavals and be unaffected by good and evil is if they're absorbed in Krishna consciousness. You have to be absorbed. This sentence is not referring to a Stoic. Everybody knows what a Stoic is. How a Stoic person doesn't show any emotions, doesn't emotionally react to things. Like the classic example of a Stoic would be Brutus and the play Julius Caesar, right? Just unaffected, with a good or bad. That's not what's being referred to here. It's not the person what's being referred to here is not a person who represses their positive and negative emotions. It's referring to a person who's experiencing a higher consciousness, a higher level of consciousness, spiritual consciousness. And by dint of that, on the strength of that, is not affected by the upheavals, good and bad. See, he's kind of absorbed in something more important. Let me read on. So as long as one is in this material world, there's always the possibility of good and evil, because the world is full of duality. And that's the nature. That's the nature of this world, that there's always going to be these good and bad sudden changes like that. So make it easier to understand. Let's present the analogy of being in the ocean. Okay. So imagine, you dropped in the middle of the ocean someplace. Okay. So the nature of the ocean is it's turbulent. It might be, you might be fortunate at the time you just get dropped in the ocean. It might be kind of calm and peaceful for a while, but just give it some time and it's going to get rough, because that's the nature of the ocean, right? It's always, swells and stuff like that. So that's the nature of the material world. It can be just like the ocean. It can be nice and calm and peaceful for some stretch of time, but it's just a matter of time, and then some big swells are going to come along, or it's going to get rough. So, so that's an analogy to help us understand this point about the nature of the material world. It's always full of dualities. There's always that possibility that something can go really wrong, something can go really right, and something can go really wrong, and it could happen at any moment, really, literally any moment. I have so many people I know. I've compiled a list, actually. Some I've been doing it over the last few years of people I know who are in Krishna consciousness, who are devotees in the movement, who passed away due to some accident or some kind of freak turn of circumstances, car crash, a burn in a building, you name it, the different things you would never expect happen right out of the clear blue sky, and that's it. So that's the nature of the material world. But now here's the good part, though. It says, but one who is fixed in Krishna consciousness is not affected by good and evil. Well, okay, what does that mean? In the most important sense, it means this, that if somebody, we'll have to explain this idea of this phrase, in Krishna consciousness. Somebody being fixed in Krishna consciousness means understanding who you really are, what you really are. I'm going to show you a picture here. Hope everybody can see this picture. It's a picture, the one where I'm tapping my finger. Okay, see how it's showing how our body is always changing, but it's also trying to show how something stays the same. And that something that stays the same is the soul. And that's who we really are. It continues after the body's finished. It existed before the body began. So being fixed in Krishna consciousness means understanding that. And it means understanding that a little bit more. It means understanding that soul is eternally related to the Supreme Soul, Krishna. Every single soul is eternally related to the Supreme Soul, Krishna. We all have an eternal spiritual relationship with Krishna, who is the Supreme Soul. And once again, being fixed in Krishna consciousness means understanding those 2 points, and it means understanding what that relationship is. It means understanding that we are eternally related to that Supreme Soul as servants, eternal loving servants. So being fixed in Krishna consciousness means that you're understanding, hey, I'm something more than this material body. I'm actually an eternal spiritual being. Krishna is the supreme spiritual being, and my eternal spiritual duty is to render spiritual, we refer to it as transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna. And when you understand that intellectually, and when you act upon that, consistently, you are what's called fixed in Krishna consciousness. Okay. And you experience life in a different way. Initially, you might experience life in the same way that an ordinary person does. But as you stay committed to that understanding and you keep acting upon that understanding, your what's called gyan, or your theoretical knowledge, will be transformed into, the other Sanskrit word is vigyan, or realized knowledge. In other words, that'll become, it'll change from being a concept to you to a reality that you experience on a higher level of consciousness. See, and when you get to that point where it's, where you actually are doing that, you're consistently applying this knowledge in your life, and you're starting to have the realization that it's true, then that's when you're not affected by good and evil, because you know that it's compared to the bigger picture, which is your spiritual identity and your eternal spiritual relationship with Krishna. It's superficial stuff. It's superficial stuff. Getting money, losing money, feeling good one day, feeling sick the next day. I mean, yeah, we always want the good stuff to happen, but when somebody who's fixed in Krishna consciousness, who's in that higher level of consciousness, those things aren't going to, what's the word? Throw him for a loop. They're not going to, he's going to be able to take that in stride, because he's not taking shelter. That's not where his happiness is coming from, having things go well in the material world or not having things go bad. He's in another level. Okay, so reading on here. Well, the end of that sentence is, I'll read that sentence again. So, but one who's fixed in Krishna consciousness is not affected by good and evil, because he is simply concerned with Krishna, who is all good, absolute. So he's concerned with Krishna, and he's concerned with his experiencing that eternal loving relationship that he has with Krishna. And which is available. I guess that's kind of, I'm trying to think of a way to explain that phrase, all good, absolute. Anyway, maybe the best thing is Krishna reciprocates. That's a significant point, that when a soul makes that decision to accept this theoretical knowledge that we're spiritual beings and we have an eternal spiritual relationship with Krishna, and decides to try to engage in his service and does it, you're not left empty-handed. Krishna reciprocates. That's the far out thing about Krishna consciousness and devotional service. It's not one way. You see, it's not one way. It's not like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna, indoctrinate myself, brainwash myself into accepting this because it's, if I think like this, it'll probably be easy. No, as I said, it's an experience. You're entering into, when you start accepting this knowledge and acting upon it, you're entering into a relationship with the supreme person. Even ordinary people reciprocate when you try to have a favorable relationship with them. What to speak of the supreme person who's been hanging out, waiting for us to do like that for eons, for a really long time. For as long as we've been here in this material world, Krishna is desiring for us to do like that. So when we start to do like that, when we start to, we'll use the expression, engage in devotional service, he likes it. He loves it. And he reciprocates. He does things to encourage us. Okay? So that's on that point, all good, absolute. Prabhupada goes on to say, such consciousness in Krishna situates one in the perfect transcendental position, technically called samadhi. Well, the samadhi. Sama means equal. Samadhi is a Sanskrit word, and it's referring to when you're enlightened. You're fixed in an enlightened state of consciousness. So yeah, that's what happens. That's the result. That's the result of taking up this knowledge and taking up the process for applying it, that you become fixed in an enlightened state of consciousness where you're once again, it's not theoretical knowledge. You're realizing, you're experiencing, you're directly experiencing these ideas that I'm presenting. They're a reality for you. And it's not just for a moment, but it's 24/7. I mean, initially it might be come and go, when you're at a lower stage of Krishna consciousness. But as you progress, eventually it comes to the point where it's there constantly. You're in. You made it. It's just like when you're in an airplane and you go up. Everybody's hopefully been in an airplane, so you can appreciate. Well, you can appreciate this example. You're on the ground. You take off, and then the plane starts going up, and it might be a really overcast day. Some kind of rainy and windy, and the plane goes into the clouds. And there might be some turbulence, you might feel some like shaking around in your seat and like that. But as the plane keeps going up and up and up, then, at some point you start seeing some light, it starts lightening up. And before you know it, the plane just gets above the clouds and that's it. It's, fly the friendly skies of United. That's it. You're above it. You're above all the weather. It's behind you, it's below you. So that's what happens. As you advance in Krishna consciousness, you become your spiritual consciousness becomes more and more elevated to a point where all the stuff here, this the upheavals, the good and evil upheavals, become something that you just become more and more removed from. To the point where it's there, but it just doesn't affect you at all. It just really doesn't affect you at all in any significant, meaningful sort of a way. And there are devotees who reach that level of Krishna consciousness and who operate at that level of Krishna consciousness. And one of them, at least the conviction that all of us have who are members of the Krishna conscious movement, was Srila Prabhupada, our spiritual master. Again, he was, as far as we were concerned, he fit that description. He was above, just like that airplane. He's like, above the mode, which we refer to as the modes of material nature. Just even in the Bible, it says there's an expression, Jesus, referring to Jesus Christ, says he was in the world, but not of the world. So we have that same understanding as far as our spiritual masters go, that they're here, and it seems like, okay, they're experiencing all the same things that other people are experiencing, but there's a sense in which, no, they're totally just above and beyond. And there's so many things that Prabhupada did which kind of confirmed that was the correct way to understand who he was. And I'll maybe talk about that as we go on in the class here. Okay, so that's the translation of the purport. Now I had some notes here. Okay, so the process, once again, we kind of touched upon it, for getting into this place where you're fixed in perfect knowledge is to accept this knowledge, put it into practice. Now that's done. Well, first we get this knowledge. How do we get it? I mean, we're getting this knowledge from somebody who has it, right? It's not coming out of the clear blue sky. We're receiving this knowledge from a teacher. And in this book, Bhagavad-gita, it explains in a later chapter that to really solidify this knowledge in your consciousness, in your being, you need to more than just study it academically and intellectually. You need to do that. I mean, it's not like you don't need to do that. You do need to do that. But in addition to that, you have to have a favorable relationship with the person you're receiving the knowledge from. So it's just like you have a debt. When somebody gives you this knowledge, for this knowledge to become alive in your life, you have to please the person who's given you that knowledge. I'll quote you the verse, and then maybe that'll help me explain it a bit better. In the 4th chapter, there's a verse that says, just try to learn the truth, which is what we're trying to do here. We're trying to learn what's the truth about life, okay? Just try to learn the truth. Well, the recommendation of the Bhagavad-gita, of Krishna, the Bhagavad-gita, is by approaching a bona fide spiritual master, okay? Which is what we're doing by studying these books. You approach a bona fide spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively, which is what you're doing when you're reading these books and listening to a class like this. So that's inquiring submissively. Then Krishna goes on to say, inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. In other words, you got to do something in exchange for receiving the knowledge. It's like if somebody gives you something valuable, generally speaking, you've got to give them something valuable in return. Now, if you get a car, somebody gives you a car, you got to pay something for it. So, the spiritual master gives you this knowledge, and in exchange for this valuable gift of this knowledge, you render service to the spiritual master. And then the result of that is, it says, the self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. Now, in that particular verse there, when it says knowledge, it's referring to realized knowledge. In other words, if you inquire submissively from the spiritual master, which means you make an effort to learn this philosophy, okay, and you make an effort to serve the spiritual master, assist him in his mission, by following his instructions and different other things. Then the reciprocation of that is that spiritual master who is connected to Krishna, the spiritual master is connected to the supreme personality of Godhead, Krishna, in a very intimate way. And he's empowered by Krishna. See? So if you do those two things, you inquire submissively and you render service favorably to the spiritual master, then the spiritual master reciprocates by elevating you. He elevates you to the platform of Krishna consciousness. That's the exchange. Pretty good deal if you stop and think about it. You just study some knowledge and then you put it into practice in your life, and you get the benefits you get is you get the benediction of being elevated to the platform of Krishna consciousness. So, okay, yeah. So service. So service has different aspects to it. One is that just certain rules and regulations that you have to follow. Like in our Krishna consciousness movement, we have different rules and regulations. For instance, we chant, we do it like a meditation, a certain amount of times a day. We also have other prohibitive regulations, such as like, no, we don't eat meat, fish, or eggs. We're vegetarians, okay? We don't engage in gambling. We don't engage in intoxication. We don't engage in sex life except for within marriage and for procreation. So part of serving the spiritual master is following those rules and regulations. It's a form of service to the spiritual master, following those rules and regulations. Another form of serving the spiritual master, which probably kind of makes is more easily understandable for us, is that you do things to help the spiritual master execute his mission. Like for instance, our spiritual master, as I mentioned earlier, he had this mission to try to spread this knowledge all over the world. So, one person can't do that single-handedly. So his request was that all his followers, and all the people who are inspired by this knowledge and this process and this whole way of life and understanding of life that he's giving us, all the people are inspired by that they take the initiative to help him to give it to other people. Right? So now I'm going to, how am I doing, RJ? Are you with us? Are you
Yeah, I'm following along.
Okay, good. Does it make sense to you?
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for checking in.
Trying to present everything in such a way that you can get it, and at the same time it's interesting for everybody else. So, okay, so I'm gonna.
Bhrgupati Prabhu.
Yeah.
I think Stephanie, who's also joined, although she's attended, I was informed class like this before. This is the first time she's with our group. I think she may have a question. Stephanie, do you? You would have to unmute. There you go.
Oh, go ahead. If you got a question, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. So I had a question. Thank you. I want to go back to where was my question? So I had the question about duality. So there was I think it was in the translation, it said in the material world, there is duality. And so then I was wondering about, like, in Krishna consciousness, does that mean that when you're fixed in Krishna consciousness, and the more that you're talking, the more I seem to have more questions. And I don't know, like, what is like the proper etiquette of asking questions? Like, is there a hand raised? I could do that here?
Usually we have a question and answer at the end.
Oh, okay.
If it's a burning question that you think is going to prevent you from understanding anything that else I'm going to say, go ahead. We're not.
Oh no, yeah, I'm okay to wait. But I was just wondering, since you stopped and asked about like that duality and non-duality. So living in Krishna consciousness, does that mean like that you are like awakened to like non-duality? Like, you know that there's duality, but you know that there's really non-dual. I mean, can you say something about that, maybe, please? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Well, let's see what can we do with that. I got a dictionary definition of duality here. It says an instance of opposition or contrast between two concepts or two aspects of something. And let's see. It was in the purport, not the translation. It came up. Let's read that sentence again. Okay, here it goes. As long as one is in the material world, there is always the possibility of good and evil, because this world is full of duality. You know, it's full of those contrasting situations. So, yeah, I think you could just take it at sort of face value. It's just basically what that sentence is saying, that it's the nature of the material world, that there's going to be good stuff coming your way and there's going to be bad stuff coming your way. And you don't know what's going to happen next. It's just like if you're using that example again in the ocean, dropped in the ocean, you don't know what to expect. You don't know if it's going to be, calm seas, or all of a sudden it's going to become very turbulent with swells of, 30, 40, 50 feet, or you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen or when it's going to happen, but you know that if you stick around in there long enough, because it's the nature of being in the ocean, that those things, you can experience all of that. So it's the same thing with this material world. It's a place of duality. It's a place where good stuff happens, bad stuff happens to everybody sooner or later. You don't know what, you don't know when. Does that help at all? But the point the point that this purport's trying to make, this translation and purport is trying to make, is that so a person who's trying to become Krishna conscious, he understands that, and he doesn't get bent out of shape by that. He doesn't let that. He understands. Okay, I just got to I got to deal with it. Actually, I didn't. I'll elaborate on that ocean example. Say you're in the ocean. Okay, you get dropped in the ocean. I mean, I don't know if there is a better way than not to deal with the swells. And I know when I went swimming in the ocean as a kid, they taught me that when the waves come in, don't try to stay up. You gotta dive. You gotta duck them. You gotta, the waves coming, and you gotta unless you want to get just thrown all over the place, you got to dive in there and go underneath it. And still you're going to get thrown around a bit and roughed up. But, all of a sudden, 3-4 seconds later, you pop up and you're basically okay. Whereas if you try to stay above the water, when the big wave's coming in, you get pummeled. So it's kind of like that, Krishna conscious person is, he knows, okay, I just have to, these things are going to happen. They're going to come my way. And I got to just learn how to deal with it as best as possible. Tolerate it. Don't be afraid, just deal with it and keep on with my activities in Krishna consciousness. Because it's the activities in Krishna consciousness that are going to be what ultimately helps us, not trying to, deal with the dualities. You're not going to be able to stop the bad things from happening. You're not going to be able to make the good things happen. It doesn't work like that. It's just inevitable that certain, bad things will come our way, certain good things will come our way or won't come our way. So best to be just tolerant to that, and just don't strive to decrease the bad upheavals or increase the good upheavals, but rather just focus all our time and energy and intelligence and everything and just trying to advance in this spiritual consciousness. That makes sense? Yeah.
So when it says, the purport says, I just want to pull it up on my end for a second.
Sure.
When it says that, let me pull this up in front of my eyes. So there will always be the possibility of good and evil, right? But one who is fixed in Krishna consciousness is not affected by the good and evil. So that means like we still live in good and evil. Even if you're fixed in Krishna consciousness, there still is good and evil, right? So that's all around us. We're still living in that, but we're not affected by it. And then it follows up with, it says, because he or she is simply concerned with Krishna, who is all good and who is all good absolute. So I'm thinking that like there could be things that are happening that are good, that are evil, but like with my studies, like my interpretation is that like we're not getting like emotionally carried away with things. We're not letting our emotions take us away, and that we're focused only on Krishna, and that we're like offering our life to Krishna, and that is our focus.
Yeah. I'm going to give you a really a practical example that hopefully will be helpful. Okay. First, I'm going to read something. I'm going to read you one paragraph from the conclusion of a series of books called the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is the authorized biography of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the devotional incarnation of Krishna. Okay, so right at the end of the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita, which was like, 9 books like this thick, okay? This is what Prabhupada had to say, very last paragraph. He says, "It is my wish that devotees of Lord Chaitanya all over the world enjoy this translation, and I'm glad to express my gratitude to the learned men in Western countries who are so pleased with my work that they're ordering in advance all my books that will be published in the future." Now, here it comes, okay? Here it comes. Prabhupada says, "On this occasion, therefore, I request my disciples who are determined to help me in this work to continue their cooperation fully, so that philosophers, scholars, religionists, and people in general all over the world will benefit by reading our transcendental literatures, such as Srimad Bhagavatam and Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita." Finished. Okay, so that was his, like, you could say, his request on the occasion of finishing this work in 1974. Prabhupada only spent another couple of few years with us. All right. So that's what he considered, really important to him, that his disciples, his followers help so that in such a way that people in general, scholars, as he said here, philosophers, religionists, and people in general will get the chance to read the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Okay, so now, I was initiated by Prabhupada in 1973, okay? And so I'm his disciple. Now, what am I doing about this request? Well, my service is, because now we're talking about service, okay? My service is distributing the books. I don't distribute, well, I do. I don't distribute the Chaitanya Charitamrita very much, but I do distribute the Srimad Bhagavatam on a regular daily basis. And I'll give you an example now of what you would, in response to your question. So today I went out on book distribution earlier today, before I came to give this class. I went to a Target department store and I was distributing books in the parking lot. Okay, so I got there and I took my boxes. I grabbed the Target shopping cart and I put my boxes in the Target shopping cart and I set them up in a certain way. And I started pushing my cart around to all the different customers, the people who were shopping there. Some of them were going into the store, some of them were coming out of the store, whatever. And I approach them and I have my sales pitch that I say. So now there were people today, there was one guy in particular, I mean, I don't blame him because he was in his car, he had his wife in there and his little kid in there, which I didn't see. And he got kind of uptight and he told me, get away from this car, He said, hey, keep moving. I don't know what you're doing out here, but just keep moving, And I just, sorry about that. Sorry, sir. And I kept moving. And there was another lady who she took all the books I had, and she gave a nice donation. Thank you so much for being out here. And it's great that you guys are doing this and everything in between, you see? So in other words, those are the upheavals. See, the upheavals are that some people are going to really love you for doing what you're doing out there. When I go out there and they express it, some people, if it was illegal, they punch me in the face or something, and everything in between. But me, now what's going on in my head, I'm not supposed to, and I try not to get elated when somebody, appreciates what we're doing, or get all upset and anxiety and depressed if somebody doesn't appreciate what I'm doing. I just keep going. I got my mission. I got my instruction from my spiritual master. Do this. Be determined to help me in my work, so that people I'm dealing with people in general all over the world will benefit by the readings of this transcendental literature. So I just try to stay fixed. I'll be honest with you, I do get a little disturbed. I get disturbed if somebody tells me to get lost, and I feel good if somebody tells me, oh, it's really great what you guys are doing. But one way or the other, I'm just going to keep doing it. You see? So that's what it means to be not affected by the dualities and be fixed in Krishna consciousness. Whether I'm appreciated or not appreciated, whether I'm successful, in the sense that the people take the books and give a donation, or I'm unsuccessful, whether it's hot or whether it's cold, or whether I feel tired or feel great, my determination is I'm going to keep doing this, regardless of the external circumstances. I'm going to keep doing it, and that's service, and that's being fixed in Krishna consciousness. See, and the understanding is if you do like that, if you're dedicated, if you're just really seriously dedicated to serving your spiritual master while simultaneously following those other basic instructions of the chanting and the rules and regulations, then he becomes pleased. He becomes, even if he's not quote unquote alive here on this planet now, he becomes pleased because there's a link between Krishna in our heart and the spiritual master. Krishna will know, the spiritual master will know. Krishna will tip them off, so to speak, or however exactly it works. But if you dedicate yourself like that, then it's just a matter of time and you experience that transcendental reciprocation. You've read Bhagavad-gita? Yeah, okay. So in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad-gita, Krishna says, he talks about this. He says, to those who are constantly devoted, which is what I've been talking about, and worship me with love, you're doing your service and you're trying to do it nicely. He says, I give them the intelligence by which they can come to me. He says, out of compassion for them, I who am dwelling within their heart, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. In other words, Krishna elevates you. He elevates you to the spiritual platform, to spiritual understanding, as a reciprocation for your surrender, your dedication, your service, like that. Does that make sense? I hope I'm hoping that's crystal clear. Is it?
That helps a lot. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So now this next point I wanted to make, once again, I'm going to try to make it in such a way that RJ can relate to it. And Stephanie, you're already kind of an insider here. You're one of us, you know the philosophy. Okay, we'll try it like this. You know, when you're in the, let's get back to the ocean again, okay? It's a hot day. So imagine you're in the ocean there. Now, most likely, if you have to stay in that ocean long enough, you're going to go down. You're going to go down, but it's probably not going to be a tidal wave or a tsunami that gets you, or a big whale or a shark or something like that. It's probably just going to be those swells. You know, you're just going to get worn out trying to deal with the swells, basically. Okay, so let's make an analogy. Let's compare that. What's the swell in material life here? Well, sex desire is a big swell for people who are. It's a big impediment or thing you got to deal with when you're trying for spiritual life. You know, I remember the first class I heard first time I came to the temple, the first class I heard on the philosophy, the person who's giving the class said, trying to become Krishna conscious or spiritually conscious is like trying to swim upstream. And, you know, I later on found out what he meant by that. When you're trying for spiritual, Prabhupada would say it's like declaring war against the illusory energy. So what is one of the main things problems that the illusory energy is presenting to us, putting in our direction that makes it difficult for us to be fixed in Krishna consciousness? Well, sex desire is certainly one of the biggies. Okay, so and once again, it's nothing to be embarrassed about or ashamed about. If you know, especially somebody who's beginning, aspiring for Krishna consciousness, if you're, you know, to feel affected by that, that's par for the course. I mean, if you continue on in Krishna consciousness and you read the Srimad Bhagavatam, you'll come across a story at some point of the person. Remember, I met at the beginning of the class, I mentioned we're in a particular line of Vaishnavas. We're in the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, and I mentioned about Brahma. He is a very big personality. He's considered one of the chief engineers in kind of setting up this universe. He's also a very, very elevated devotee. Well, there's a story in the Bhagavatam where even he had a problem at one point with this very thing we're talking about, you see? So it's not like it's just something, it's a big problem. And even big devotees sometimes have a problem with it. But it's not insurmountable. Prabhupada explains that, you know, sometimes sex desire is referred to, in the material world, they have this, I think it's a mythological character, Cupid. Everybody's heard of Cupid. Cupid shoots his arrows and you become influenced by passion or sex desire. So in Sanskrit, that's referred to as Madan. So Krishna is referred to as Madan Mohan. It's just like the ordinary people, ordinary souls in this material world are affected by passion or sex desire. So in the same way, and attracted by that, Cupid or Madan is attracted by Krishna. In other words, the point is that if somebody becomes attracted by Krishna, then they overcome that attraction for mundane sex desire. And Krishna, now here's something to even elaborate upon that point more. Krishna has an eternal consort. See, Krishna consciousness is really far out. Not only is God a person, but he's got a partner. You know, in Krishna consciousness, we have a male and female kind of conception of God. And so that his partner is her name is Radharani, and she's referred to as Madan Mohan Mohini. So it means she's the attractor of Cupid. So in other words, if somebody is somehow or another is able to do something to please the eternal consort of Krishna, by their service, then they're guaranteed, they're going to overcome that problem. So now this ties in with what I read to you from the concluding words of Srila Prabhupada, where he's requesting his disciples who are determined to help him to in his work to get the books out there to people. How it ties in is this. Here I'm talking to you from Los Angeles, okay, which is I'm living in the community called New Dwarka. It's been here since about 1970, 71. We're actually on the verge of celebrating the 50th anniversary of the installation of our deities here at the temple. So back in about 1974 or so, there was one of the leader here. He was preaching. He was telling all the other devotees that when you go out, RJ, I'm sorry, I can't figure out how to make this. You're going to have to sit this one out, okay? I'll make the point, but I don't know how I can make it in such a way that you're going to be able to grasp this one. But anyway, just hang in there. So he made this point. This leader, he's saying that when you go out and you preach to people and you try to kind of engage them in devotional service by giving them a book, it's like doing something in the mood of the gopis. The gopis, the gopis, Stephanie, just raise your hand. Okay, you heard. Okay. So the gopis are the most advanced devotees of Krishna. And so he was making that point that, this is preaching and trying to engage other people in devotional service is like being in the mood of the gopis. And so some of the devotees in the community, they thought, whoa, wait a second. That's taking it a bit too far, So they wrote to our Prabhupada and they asked Prabhupada about that. And Prabhupada wrote a letter back saying, that's correct. That's correct. Preaching Krishna consciousness, trying to, go out, reaching out to people, try to help them and bring them into devotional service. That's in the mood of the gopis. Now, somebody might say that, wait a second, I've read the Krishna book and I've read some Goswami. I don't see there's no example in there of gopis trying to engage people who aren't engaged in devotional service. Devotional service. There's no, what's your basis for saying that? What's your shastric or scriptural basis for saying that? Well, that's correct. In Krishna Leela, there's no example of the gopis going out and trying to engage the conditioned souls in devotional service. Okay? But in Chaitanya Leela, in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, you do have that. You have that in the form of the 6 Goswamis. The 6 Goswamis, not all of them, but some of them were gopis. They were manjaris, there's manjaris, there's shakis, there's different types of gopis. So the 6 Goswamis were a kind of gopi, manjari, and there's a song that's written by one of the acharyas. His name was Srinivas Acharya. He was kind of like, somebody a bit further down the line. So he says, Nana Shastra Vachada Naika Nipano Sadharma Samstapako Lokanam Hitakadano Chibuvane Manyo Sadanya Karo Radha Krishna Padada Vinda Bhajanan Nandena Mataliko Bamde Rupa Sanatano Raguyago Shijiva Gopalago, which means I offer my respectful obeisances unto the 6 Goswamis, and he says their names, Sri Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, Shijiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are always scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures, here it comes, with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. So that's what they were doing. That was their engagement. Their engagement was, one of their engagements was to scrutinizingly study all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles so that people could get it, so that people could get Krishna conscious philosophy, you see? So that they were doing that. And this ties in with the mission of Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya, I was I wasn't there that year, but there was one in 1975 in Mayapur, which is birthplace of Lord Chaitanya, Prabhupada was giving a class, and when all the devotees were there, it was during the Mayapur festival. And during that class, he quoted this shloka. Maybe he might have quoted it a dozen times. I lost track. I can't count. But he said, Yade Deka Tade Kaha Krishna Upadesh, Amada Agyaya Guruhana Tadedesh. His instruction was, Lord Chaitanya's instruction was, wherever you go, whoever you meet, tell them about Krishna. And in this way, become a spiritual master and deliver everybody in the land. See, so that's, what the six Goswamis were doing ties in perfectly with, with Lord Chaitanya's instruction. And it ties in perfectly, if you stop and think about it, of Lord Chaitanya's mission, because Lord Chaitanya, he came to give everybody love of Krishna, and in the mood of the gopis. And it's interesting that, part of his instruction was to give it to other people. See, that was, he's famous, he's well known for encouraging everybody to chant Hare Krishna, but in addition to that, he did give that instruction. That was an instruction. That's something he wanted his followers to do. So yeah, it's something that's very beneficial. So we were talking about getting back to the basic point that, by inquiring submissively and rendering service, the self-realized soul becomes pleased and he imparts knowledge. That's a good service to do. That's a good service to do. Trying to give Krishna consciousness to other people, because it's really pleasing to the spiritual masters. It's kind of like, it's what the Krishna conscious movement really is all about. Krishna conscious movement is all about becoming Krishna conscious and trying to give it to other people. And RJ, now hopefully you can kind of get you back in here now. See, we're more than just interested in becoming Krishna conscious ourselves, God conscious ourselves. We are interested in that, but we're also interested in trying to give it to other people. And it's kind of really interesting that a very important part of the process for us to become Krishna conscious ourselves is to try to give it to other people. Okay? So it's kind of works really well. Let me stop there just for the moment. And does anybody have any further questions? Or yeah, go ahead.
Excuse me. Thank you. So I remember when I first got my first copy of the Bhagavad-gita, and it was at a street corner in Chicago, and it was like 20 years ago. And just like you were saying, you were in Target, and there were people out on the street corner. But so the question is, though, I don't know what passages it is in the text, but there is something that says, let people do what they do, like don't I feel like it's kind of contrary to what you're saying, like don't make people do something,
I know what you're
you're
talking
going to
about.
absolutely fine, because I know you know it like the back of your hand, right? And so my interpretation of that passage is to like lead by example. And so I was wondering can you first give me like what the chapter and the verses?
Yeah, okay. It's chapter 3, text 29 is I think what you're referring to. I'll read it to you. And you tell me if this is what you're
okay, thank you.
One you're thinking, okay? So Krishna speaking, he says, bewildered by the modes of material nature, the ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached. Okay, now here's what he said, but Krishna goes, but the wise should not unsettle them. Right. Although these duties are inferior due to the performer's lack of knowledge. So that's Krishna's statement, right? Mm-hmm. That's what you're referring to?
Yes.
And then your conclusion was that therefore maybe we should just leave them alone?
No, so I'm wondering, what do you do about that? So Krishna's saying,
All right, wait. let me help you with that, okay?
Thank you.
I think I'm going to read you one more. But that was the translation I read you. Now I'm going to read you the second paragraph of Srila Prabhupada's purport. Sorry to interrupt you there, but I think this might be what what we're looking for. And tell me if this answers the question. Okay, so in the second paragraph of his purport, Prabhupada says, men who are ignorant cannot appreciate the activities in Krishna consciousness. And therefore, Lord Krishna advises us not to disturb them and simply waste valuable time. So Prabhupada's reiterating what's there in the translation. Now here it comes. It says, but the devotees of the Lord are more kind than the Lord because they understand the purpose of the Lord. Consequently, they undertake all kinds of risks, even to the point of approaching ignorant men to try to engage them in the acts of Krishna consciousness, which are absolutely necessary for the human being. Okay, and I'll give you an example, an analogy, hypothetical. Okay, imagine you're in a family, with your mother and father, and you got a whole bunch of brothers and sisters. Okay, and your parents are really nice people. They really love all of you brothers and sisters. And one of your brothers or sisters kind of goes really off the rails, and your parents are really upset with that brother. Okay, you know that your parents love all of you, but they're really upset with that particular brother because he's just been so disobedient and he's got himself into so much trouble, and they're really PO'd with him. Okay, and they say to you, just forget about so and so. Don't if you don't talk, don't call him. Don't, if he rings you on the phone, don't answer his calls. Don't do anything to help him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, they're saying like that, but you, as the child of your parents, and knowing what your parents are really like, and knowing your brother is really basically a good kid, and you just don't accept that. You do something to try to help your brother, despite the fact that your parents said no. Just leave him alone. Don't worry about him. Let him suffer a bit. You're going against what the parents said, but they're not going to be displeased because they know when it comes to their attention. Once again, hypothetical situation. They're going to appreciate that. Oh, you know what? We just got frustrated and aggravated and annoyed with him and didn't want to know about him. But look, Stephanie's so good that she's prepared to go the extra mile there to try to get her brother back on the straight and narrow, and they appreciate that. So that's what this paragraph is saying here. You get it? Or did I don't know. Did I make it clear? Did I explain it clearly enough?
Yes, I understand that. Thank you. Because I think of like Srila Prabhupada, like he would, of course, like he came here, he came to the United States. So that's like contrary to that passage. And I still wonder, like, so why would Sri Krishna, why would he say that? Why would that be in this text? Like not to to disturb those who don't, who are like, ignorant or something, like.
Yeah, well, Krishna's compassionate. It's not like Krishna's not compassionate, but people have free will, you see? So the idea here is Krishna's talking to Arjuna here, who's at this point like an aspiring transcendentalist. So where Krishna's coming from, I believe, here in this part of the Bhagavad-gita, he's making the point to Arjuna that, people who are after spiritual life and pursuing spiritual life, it's not easy. It's a challenge. And don't be sentimental. Don't let yourself don't get caught up with people who aren't at all interested in spiritual life, at least initially, and just make sure you get established yourself in spiritual life. Okay, so Krishna's not trying to be not compassionate. It's not that Krishna's not compassionate. He is, but he's practical at the same time. It's a practical advice. But then on a higher level, Krishna wants everybody to take up spiritual life. But as I said, people have free will. So when Krishna sees that people are determined not to take up spiritual life, so he's saying to his devotees, okay, look, don't waste time with them. Don't waste time with them. Just, go deal with the people who want it. But then the devotees really understanding as it says here, the real purpose of, the real feeling of Krishna, sometimes the devotees will even try to help people become Krishna conscious that Krishna might never bother with. If that makes any sense.
Thank you. Yes.
Anybody, Atma, you want to say something about that? Can you add something to that?
Oh, Prabhu, I'm satisfied.
Okay,
Hare Krishna.
sorry. Okay, well, anybody else want to ask anything or say anything at this point? RJ, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm just like trying to follow along whatever it is that you're saying right now. So thanks for checking in.
Is anything, what's making sense to you? What's not making sense to you?
Well, I mean, like I have like some familiarity with this text beforehand, so I'm just trying to like connect what I know with what you're teaching right now, and a lot of it is making sense to me. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna try to say something now that's pretty basic. We're all after happiness. Okay, that's like kind of a no-brainer. Everybody wants to be happy. Here in the West, it seems like people have got the idea that it's culture that happiness is going to come from matter. That's a pretty predominant idea or mindset here in the West. Happiness is coming from matter. In other words, you have to, if you arrange matter in the right way, you cook a meal and you cook it just right, it's going to taste good. Or if you want to be with another person, if they just look a certain way, you're going to be attracted. If they don't look that way, you're not attracted. In other words, happiness is based on matter. And in order for that to work, for that happiness for you to derive that happiness, the matter has to be arranged in the right way. You got to hit a home run. It's not a good, if you miss the ball, no, it's not, you got to hit it and knock it out of the park. You get the idea. Okay. So here in the West, the things that are emphasized a lot in interactions among people is, being efficient, being productive, being accurate, all these mechanical kind of qualities. Why? Because once again, because happiness is based upon matter, and in order for that matter to produce the happiness, you have to have a very precise, exact arrangement. Things have to be done exactly right. And then you get the happiness from the matter, okay? Material happiness. Now, Krishna consciousness is different. And our idea is, in Krishna consciousness, that happiness is based upon spirit. And the happiness that we're looking for is not the happiness that one derives when the matter is just kind of combined in exactly the right way. It's a happiness that one experiences as a result of awakening one's dormant love for Krishna. So what's important in Krishna consciousness is not technology. If you stay with us, RJ, and you read the books, you're not going to find a lot of information about fast cars and nice buildings and etc. New iPhones and the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's not about technology. It's not about like arranging matter in exactly the right way. And no, it's about, as I said, reawakening your dormant love for Krishna. That's the happiness that Krishna consciousness is offering. Totally different way of understanding life, totally different way of living life. Okay? And so that's basically what devotional service is all about. That there's a verse, I'll quote this verse, it's in one of the books. It goes, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhu Kabenaya Shravanade Sute Chitte Kore Udaya. That pure love for Krishna is lying dormant within the heart of every living entity. Within every soul, every single soul has the potential to be a lover of Krishna. And devotional service is the process by which that dormant love for Krishna can be awakened. So that's what we're trying to do. That's what this meeting is all about, that we're doing right now. That's what our movement is all about. That's our approach to life. We're trying to, and in one sense, we're just like everybody else. We want to be happy, right? But we don't believe that the happiness is going to come as a result of having really nice material possessions or really nice material relationships. We don't believe that that's going to work. Some temporary happiness might be there, we're not, but definitely not permanent happiness. That expression, sour grapes? I might be jumping a little bit here, but I'll if you, as you're hearing me speak, you might be thinking like, well, these people are kind of like in a bit of a sour grapes mentality. And here's the definition of sour grapes. It says it's used to refer to an attitude in which someone adopts a negative attitude to something because they cannot have it themselves. Okay, so somebody might hear Hare Krishnas, us, that's referred to as Hare Krishnas, the devotees of Krishna, talk about material life, and they might get the impression that, man, these guys are just like a bunch of sour grapers. They really want, they can't, they're speaking negatively about material enjoyment, and it's probably because they can't have it. They just, whatever, they don't have the good karma to enjoy here in the material world. So they're like that fox that couldn't get the grapes, and they're just going, those grapes are sour. Well, maybe there might be an element of that in some devotees' mentality, but it's okay. And I'll tell you why. Because when you really study this philosophy and you really think about it, the fact of the matter is the grapes are sour. It's not just the frustrated fox's opinion. The grapes really are sour. If you think about it deeply, see? So, and the devotees understand that, by studying the philosophy and really getting into it seriously, you can come to that understanding. Why? I mean, birth, death, old age, and disease. Doesn't matter who you are. I mean, I could, without mentioning names, I could think of, and I'm not into this, but I could think of a half a dozen really famous actors or, personalities that, Kobe Bryant or Paul Newman, or, just off the top of my head, they were, had everything, money, fame, everything, good health, you name it. And then just something happens and it's gone. See, so that's the nature of the material world. So in other words, the grapes really are sour. There is for some people, if you have the good karma, some material happiness or enjoyment, but it's not permanent. So what devotees are doing is we're going for something that's a happiness that is eternal. And once you get it, you don't lose it. Now, that makes a lot more sense. And that's what's being presented in these literatures, that there is such a happiness. And that's what devotional service is all about. And that happiness is, as I just stated, the happiness experienced when one is able to reawaken their dormant love for Krishna. It's not a cakewalk. It's a really serious thing. And we have to be the people who, if you take it up, you got to be as serious about getting this happiness as we see the materialists are about getting the happiness that what they consider to be happiness. They work hard, they get up early in the morning. They're serious about doing what they got to do to get the material happiness. And we got to be that serious, but in a totally different way, like in a diametrically opposite sort of a worldview. We have to have that same sort of determination and seriousness about trying to elevate us, advance in Krishna consciousness. So one last point, and then I'm out of things to say, and I'm out of energy too.
Grace Bhrgupati,
Yeah.
Bhakti Dixon has a question. I don't know if you want to take it after next point or you
Yeah, let
want.
me make this final point. It's a quickie, and then we'll take the questions and we'll have some discussion. Okay, so there was one devotee, I can't remember who it was, and he said to Prabhupada, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, yesterday was his disappearance day, actually, ironically, said, Prabhupada, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is my favorite author. And Prabhupada said, he looked at him and he said, no, I'm your favorite author. I'm your favorite author. In other words, and that's significant. I'll tell you why it's significant. Because Prabhupada is a pure devotee of Krishna. Prabhupada is on as high a level of Krishna consciousness as you could, possibly desire for have a spiritual master be. Prabhupada, what Prabhupada gave us is sufficient. It's sufficient for us to achieve complete perfection in life. We don't have to look anywhere else. We don't have to go anywhere else. We just have to, take what Prabhupada's given us in his books and serve him, and that's it. You don't need to do anything else. There's an expression here in America. There was an expression here in America. There's gold in them dar hills. It was referring to the gold rush days. When people were coming out to California they thought there was to mine gold. To paraphrase that a little bit, there's nectar in them dar pages. And it's all in Prabhupada's books. You don't have to look any further. I mean, I just listening to a lecture the other night. I heard Prabhupada say that he just said, he's making the point, just read Krishna book repeatedly. And then you're always associating with Krishna. So in other words, he seemed to think you don't hear statements from Prabhupada about encouraging us to read the literatures of this Goswami. That there is some statement in the Chaitanya Charitamrita where he mentions that. But in general, Prabhupada is emphasizing his own books. What he gave us is, if you don't have to go any further. You don't have to go anywhere else. You just have to serve in Prabhupada's mission, read his books, all the most elevated, sublime understandings of anything, of devotional service, are accessible simply by taking shelter of Prabhupada and his books. One final point. I remember when the Nectar Devotion came out, Prabhupada said, so now the Nectar Devotion has come out. Everybody should get a copy of this valuable book. And he said, read it. He said, once, twice, thrice, until you have threadbare understanding. He said, don't, as soon as you don't understand something, don't come and write me and say, Prabhupada, what is it? So just keep reading it. So that's an important point. Because Prabhupada felt, and why that's important is this, because this is getting back to this other point I made about the difference between happiness in the West and, the conception of how to get happiness in the West and how to get happiness in Krishna consciousness. Westerners, materialists have this idea of acquisition. They think they're going to get happiness by acquiring money, and the things it can buy, nice houses, nice cars, nice clothes. Okay. It even goes on to knowledge. One might think by acquiring knowledge. But Krishna consciousness, the happiness comes as a result of purification of consciousness. That's what we heard in that verse. Nityasiddha Krishna prema sabe kabinaya shravanade sudhe chitti. When the consciousness is purified by the hearing from the pure devotee, when you hear from the pure devotee, your consciousness becomes purified, and then kodaya udaya, then that love for Krishna becomes awakened. See, so that's what Prabhupada was. That's the purport of that instruction from Prabhupada. Just you got the nectar devotee, even if you don't understand it, or it's not making so much sense to you, or you don't feel so. Read it again, because by repeated reading, repeated reading, repeated chanting, the consciousness will become purified. And then to the degree our consciousness becomes purified, to that degree, we're going to be able to appreciate the rasas. Rasa is a Sanskrit word. It means the transcendental loving relationships which is the source of all real happiness and pleasure. To the degree our consciousness becomes purified, to that degree, we're going to be able to appreciate that that's all right there in Prabhupada's books. So that's it. Let's questions or comments. Dixon.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for your wonderful lecture. I mean, I wanted you to elaborate a little bit on, I mean, Stephanie is not here. She just left.
Oh, okay.
I wanted you to talk about, in her question, she was talking about how Krishna said that you shouldn't bother the ignorant and let them be and stuff like that. I was thinking about Jagai and Madai in the Chaitanya Leela, where Lord Nityananda actually tried to approach them and then give them this message of Krishna consciousness. And eventually it became great devotees of Krishna. So I was just thinking if you could elaborate on it and how it corroborates with what you said and what you read from Prabhupada's purport to support the fact that, yeah, the devotees are more compassionate than the Lord, and they try to extend themselves to give Krishna consciousness to the so-called ignorant.
Okay, well, let's see if I'm remembering correctly, and Atma can help me with this. That pastime with Jagai and Madai, that took place over 2 occasions. If I remember correctly, on the first occasion, they tried to, Lord Nityananda and Haridas Thakur, they tried approaching Jagai and Madai, and they got rejected. I can't remember exactly what. And they reported that to Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya was kind of his move, oh, good, yeah, these stupid fellows, don't worry about them, you know. But then they decided, but Lord Nityananda was thinking, you know what, if we could deliver these 2 guys, then Lord Chaitanya will really be glorified as the Patita Pavana, the deliverer of the most fallen. So he decided to give it another go, you know. And so that's sort of an example of that. How the devotee, Prabhupada said, the devotees are more merciful than the Lord. They had such a strong desire to reach out to the fallen conditioned souls, and also to show how Lord Chaitanya is the most merciful, that that was their motivation. And that ultimately was appreciated by Lord Chaitanya, that they took, that the extent of his compassion and the extent of the risk that he was willing to take to execute the mission, to see Lord Chaitanya glorified, and also to deliver those fallen conditioned souls.
Prabhu, would you say? Oh,
My wife's trying to tell me something. Go ahead.
I'll wait.
What?
You can give the example of that the secret mantra that he wasn't supposed to
Oh,
say.
okay. Okay, well, yeah, let me just throw, just before you go, there's another example of that. My wife just reminded me of this devotee. Who was it, man? Who was that? Who is the devotee who was told by his spiritual master, I'm giving you this mantra? Oh, Ramanujacharya. Yeah, Ramanujacharya. You know that story, right?
Yeah.
His spiritual master gave him the mantra and said, okay, but you chant this mantra, you're going to get liberated, but it's confidential. Don't tell it to anybody.
Yeah.
And Ramanujacharya went, oh, okay. So by chanting this mantra, is that powerful that somebody become liberated? Yeah, that's such a powerful mantra. Anybody who chants this mantra could become liberated, but it's confidential. So I'm just telling you, don't tell anybody. So then, the next thing he knows that he goes up on top of the roof there and he starts yelling out to everybody, hey, everybody, chant this mantra and you'll become liberated. And where he gets back to his spiritual master, he finds out that, what'd you do? Initially he was very upset with him, and why did you, I told you that mantra is confidential. Why are you broadcasting it to everybody in the marketplace from the roof? And then Ramanujacharya explained to him, said, look, I know you told me that. And if you curse me and I go to hell as a result, I'll have to accept it. But I just felt that if this mantra is really going to give people liberation, if they chant it, I had to give it to him. And, he was so sincere, it was so genuine, that when his spiritual master heard that, his spiritual master was touched, and he said, actually, you're a greater devotee than me. That's good. I'm happy with you. I'm pleased with you. I'm not displeased with you. So it's another example of that. Okay, sorry, Atma, go ahead, please.
Prabhu, I was thinking, going back to well, not going back to, sticking with the concept or the issue of Krishna, or the devotees being quote unquote kinder than Krishna, in that they will take risks to share Krishna consciousness with the ignorant, whereas Krishna may appear indifferent and leave the ignorant undisturbed. I guess what I'm thinking is, it almost seems like an irony, because the devotees, to the extent that they are devotees, to the extent that they're expressing compassion to ignorant persons, that compassion and that kindness, it's simply a reflection of Krishna's love for the living entities who the devotees are being kind to and taking risks to spread Krishna consciousness to. And so if given that that's simply a fact and consistent with our philosophy, that that the more elevated a devotee is, and the more he sees all living entities as spirit souls and expresses love for them, that's because he's seeing them the way Krishna sees them, basically. Since that's our philosophy, it seems to me then that that we can explain away, sort of, or we can justify, I guess you could say, why it is that Krishna you could say, is less kind than the devotees are, is that Krishna simply wants to give his devotees the credit and the opportunity to preach. Because if Krishna does everything himself, kind of, then what's left for us to do to learn how to be more Krishna conscious, to learn how to have the opportunity to please Krishna, to engage in devotional service, and to do something adventurous that makes us, excited about becoming more Krishna conscious and doing something good in this world. So I think that's the way, to me, that's the way we can sort of justify this point, which is sort of an ultimate irony, because for a devotee to be to be kinder than Krishna conscious, it's akin to saying the devotee is more Krishna conscious than Krishna. But you can only be Krishna conscious because you're conscious of what Krishna thinks and feels. So I think that's the only way to explain it. What do you think, Prabhu?
Yeah, I think you did a good job. I think that point you made about Krishna wants to give the devotees the credit. He's giving us an opportunity to do the service. He mentions that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that the Lord Nityananda was able to do something, achieve things by when he went to Bengal that even Lord Chaitanya couldn't achieve. So yeah, I think that's the right understanding. And you're right, it's a paradox, but it's it's kind of something that's happening under the auspices of the Yoga Maya. It's kind of like, energy of the Lord. So yeah, I think you did a good job of explaining it. Anybody else have anything they'd like to say or ask? Okay, so it's 4:06. Should we just do the kirtan and then?
That would be great, Prabhu. Yeah, so if you could lead a short kirtan, and then we'll end for our session for the evening, for the week.
With your permission, after the kirtan, can I disappear, because I got some stuff I got to do? So I'll just do the kirtan, and then I won't stick around for your announcements and everything, if that's okay.
Yeah, and I'll make the announcement short after you leave, but absolutely. And thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Okay. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamim Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvashesha Sunyavadi Paschachare Shatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nitai Gaur Hari Bo Hari Bo Hari Bo Nitai Gaur Hari Bo Nitai Gaur Hari Bo Hari Bo Hari Bo Nitai Gaur Hari Bo Gaur Pemanandi Hari Hari Bo
Haribo, Bhrgupati Prabhu ki jai.
Thank you.
Haribo.
Haribo.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Right, everybody, and hopefully we'll see everybody soon.
Hope to